Faizal, let me ask you, you allude to the fact that some changes were underway. One of them being the delivery mechanism, which the pandemic has now forced our hands into going into online format. But there's been other shift that was afoot even before the pandemic, especially with the fourth industrial revolution. There's been so many studies from the OECD, World Economic Forum, and what have you, that the education that is being delivered needs to drastically change. Your thoughts on that, Faizal?
Yeah, I do agree, and I'll quote Clay Christensen, who he passed away about a year ago, a recognized authority on disruption, right? One of the things he said way back in 2018 was probably 50% of the 40,000 or 4,000 educational institutes in the US would go bankrupt in the next 50 years or so, right? So which was a pretty bold statement to make, even before all this pandemic. So now as we talk about that shift, right? The delivery model for education US is basically a 4-year degree. Is that still relevant today? So some of the things that we talked about, I alluded to some change. There are some open courses, they call it MOOC, right? Mass online education. So for example, Coursera and Udemy, you may or may not have heard of those, but they deliver short form courses over the internet, right? Certifications was another trend that has been going on for a long time. As you know, Microsoft, Cisco, they all had their own certification. And then there were the online schools also, right? Again, the differentiating factor between them and most of your traditional school was, well, you can't replicate the innovation and the collaboration that happens when people meet in person. That's really the distinguishing factor, right? That's what, the larger institution could say, this is what we have that you don't have. Now let's sit today. Well, what are the bigger schools doing? And what are these upstart doing? At this point, it's the same, right? If you take away the in-person educational format, well, now everybody's on the same playing field. So some of the thornier questions that are coming up now from parents is, wait a minute, I'm paying so much more for my kid to go to college. But now you're giving this online education, which he could have got somewhere else, probably for much cheaper. So Mr. Big School, are you going to reduce the tuition this year? Are you going to freeze the tuition increase this year? What are you going to do? So the educational institutes are having to grapple with these very questions even as we speak, right? Because, as I said, I do work for an institution that works very closely with parents sending their kids to school, their children to school. And this is coming up more and more in their conversation now.